In DC, for DC. DC Radio, 96.3 HD4 and DCRadio.gov.
Welcome to Inside Style, DC Radio, 96.3 HD4. I'm your host, George Worrell. Thank you for tuning in today. Today is a special show. We are going to talk about men and women in recovery, living life on life's terms. I have the pleasure of welcoming my old friend, real estate broker Scott Purcell. Scott, welcome.
Hi, George. Well, thank you very much for having me.
Well, first I want to congratulate you on that major sale of the Ambassador's residence on R Street, Northwest DuPont Circle.
Thank you.
That was huge.
It was difficult.
Yeah, of course. Anything that's, worth is a little difficult. Can you just tell us just a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, they had been through like 3 or 4 different brokers before me. Mm-hmm. That property actually was an environmental nightmare.
Okay.
Asbestos, lead paint.
Okay.
So we procured a buyer actually that was Pakistani that lived in Texas.
Okay.
He owns a company called Tweaker Energy Drinks.
Okay.
So he paid cash for it. In 30 days, he wired the money over. So it was very streamlined for me, but getting to that point was very difficult.
Mm-hmm. But you didn't give up.
No.
So talking about not giving up, you hail from from Pittsburgh, I understand.
That's correct.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Yeah. So what brought you here to Washington?
Well, my mother... Let me just start. So my mother I was a single mother. I never met my father. Mm-hmm. So she was very ambitious, and she came down here in 1967 and took the civil service exam and passed. Got a job at the Postal Service. Then she started to move up the ranks, and I lived with my grandparents during that time. And when she moved up the ranks, she sent for me, and we lived in the suburbs in Kensington, Maryland. She got remarried, and then she really moved up the ranks. For someone without a college degree, she ended up managing the procurement section of the Postal Service until she retired. So that was a good influence for me.
So you went to school here in Washington?
I actually went to high school in Montgomery County, outside of Washington.
Okay.
Yes.
So what was life like for you and, you're on your journey? So it seems like our journeys are parallel, like these wonderful ways of growing up. I grew up with both my parents in Atlantic City. And, my parents didn't drink or anything. And I don't know what it was. I guess, I do know what it was. My grandfather, my mother's father, was an alcoholic. And they say sometimes it skips a generation, but there was nothing growing up that said, stereotypically that I should be an alcoholic.
Yes.
So what was it like that you thought during that journey that made that left turn?
I'll tell you exactly what happened. When I moved here from Pittsburgh, coming from, a black, lower middle class, but, we idolized, at that time, I'm going to give my age, we idolized Michael Jackson, the Jackson 5. Was it? So we all tried to dress like them.
Right.
So I had a big, pretty fro, and I wore my platforms, and I wore my bell-bottom sleeves and all that stuff. When I came down here, I lived in a predominantly white neighborhood, and they had never seen anybody live and in person like me. Mm-hmm. So I began being called the N-word, chased home. And I was, after the first couple of months, actually my first day of school, somebody called me the N-word, and I was like, what? And I punched him in the face, and I got suspended, not the other person. So what eventually happened was, during my 6th grade year, I gravitated toward people that would accept me, and those were the people that were actually out carousing and using drugs and getting high, because they didn't really have any expectation of any sort of expectation of a greater purpose in their lives, because their parents didn't either.
That was it.
Yeah, that was all.
Yeah.
It was really quite something I look back on. And my mother and my stepfather were like, well, my stepfather had a master's degree in English and in psychology. My mother, like I said, never went to college, but he was like, why are you hanging out with these people? And so it progressively got worse. So In 7th grade, I got expelled from the Montgomery County school system, period. So I had to go to private school. Then I got expelled from there. And then my mother petitioned the school, the Montgomery County school system, to allow me back in. So during that whole period of time, I was still floundering, and I continued to flounder.
When did you start drinking, or did you? What was your...
But the first drink I ever had, I was 10 years old. And I actually got that from my mother on New Year's Eve. It was just a small little glass of champagne.
Which people think is innocent.
Yeah, but it really wasn't. It kind of, let the tiger out of the cage for me, because by the time I was 12, I was smoking marijuana on a regular basis. By the time I was 13, 14, I was using a variety of drugs. By the time I was 18, I was using heroin on a regular basis. So I used heroin from the time I was 18 through 37 years of age.
I know for me, it just felt, it was an escape. Like I couldn't deal or didn't want to deal with reality.
Yes, it was a coping mechanism.
Yeah, like there were things around me, I always say when people say there are 3 strikes, and for me, it was being male, black, and gay.
Yeah.
And there was nothing that I could see that... Worse is not the good word, but it was just a strong stigma, because you were getting it from the church, you were getting it from women, you were getting it from family members. Although I must say my family, I'm an only child, were very supportive, but they just never talked about anything.
Right.
I was more of a late bloomer. After I got out of college, I just, just Philadelphia was it. Like Philadelphia, and there was a place called Smart Place, and I love to dance, and like you said, all of these people were self-accepting, and it just felt like it was just us. But on Sundays was the loneliest time for me, because everybody went home and I had no place to go. And it just felt like really, like just...
I can identify with that.
You know what I mean? Like it's just... And you don't really realize all of that until, at some point, you find a better way. And what was that for you?
Well, so I lived on the streets until I was 37 years old. And I did manage to have, odd jobs as waiter or here and there, that kind of thing. But that same sort of experience, at the end of the day, when everyone else would go home, I would have nowhere to go. And it was at, 2 o'clock in the morning, so I'd go find a bench somewhere to sleep on. And I could only do that for a certain period of time. So throughout my 20s and most of my 30s, I in and out of, being incarcerated and living on the streets and that sort of thing. So what happened was, I still attribute this to grace, was I was panhandling change, and somebody came up and put a piece of paper in my cup. And I don't know why I kept that piece of paper, but I did. And it was the name of a treatment facility. So I kept it. I don't know why. And a few weeks later, I got stabbed in the neck. And I went to the hospital, and I was like, okay, well, there's this treatment facility, so I guess I'll go in there and, get cleaned up and, get a room somewhere and continue my using. But what happened when I was in treatment, something happened, and I have no idea to this day what it was, except that the desire to use any drugs or alcohol just was lifted from me. And I call that grace, because I had no control over it. It wasn't my decision. And that was 26 years ago. So,
wow. And then you got into your field of real estate.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's just been an amazing journey. How do you do every day? Like, for me, I got clean when I was 34. It'll be 28 years tomorrow, actually.
Congratulations.
Thank you, and congratulations to you as well. That I had this drive. I've always had the drive, but the alcohol kind of nixed that. I didn't have the courage to do it. So like coming into the rooms and, going to meetings every day and listening to people and people older than we were in it and taking the direction and doing it. And I remember hearing something when I was in the recovery house, and there were 6 of us, and they were like, only 2 or 3 of you are going to make it. And I knew, just hands down, I was one of those people that were going to make it. Yeah. And it was tunnel vision. But as I stayed cleaner longer, I had to, because I felt like I had to make up for lost time.
Yeah.
So it was one thing to the next, like one goal to the next, and I never really enjoyed it. So when I wrote a book called On the Other Side of Style, I had forgotten all of the stuff of some of the accomplishments that I had done because I was constantly trying to make up for time. And so that's one of the things that I've learned in coping is to slow down a little bit and enjoy the time and the things that are happening, like the show, or filming a TV show, or things like that, or just dreams. So did you have dreams?
Well, when I first got out of treatment, or actually while I was in treatment, I got a job as a waiter. Good job at the Tavern Inn, making money, saving money. So then I got an apartment. I was like, wow, I got my own apartment. I can't believe this. And then I started feeling like, I could do more than this. And my sponsor at the time says, well, you like buildings. You always talk about buildings. Get your real estate license. Oh, I could never pass that test. He says, just try it. So I did. And I got affiliated with a manager that apparently saw more in me than I saw myself. And she said, if you do what I tell you to do, you will be successful. And I was really scared. I was like, okay, I'll do whatever. So my first year, I was the Rookie of the Year for Long and Foster, which was quite something because let me tell you something, I had never touched a computer. I didn't even know how to use a fax machine. I didn't.
Welcome to the club.
When I first started. So then, all of a sudden I'm Rookie of the Year, and that brought a lot of pressure, because I was like, oh, now I have to live up to this expectation. But then things just started to materialize for me until the crash of 2008. Then I was like, well, what do you do then? So fortunately, I was on the board of directors for a organization called the Festival Center in Adams Morgan, and I met a commercial real estate broker there who's actually much larger than I thought that he was. He was one of the principals in BlackRock, and his wife was the vice president of the Simon Corporation, which is the largest mall holder in the country, and I had no idea who these people were. But he says, as long as you're selling houses, you'll never be successful. He goes, you need to transfer over. And I was
commercial?
Yeah, and I was like, well, I don't know what to do. He says, go take these classes. So I started taking classes and learned about leasing. Then I learned about evaluating multifamily properties and retail properties. And it took a while. I mean, it really did. I was broke for a while. I was probably broke for 5 years. I mean, they repossessed my car at one point. I mean, but then all of a sudden I started to see a glimmer of light.
But then let's stop there for a second. So that's the point. So I when I talk with friends, we always say the story of the beginning when there's nothing.
Yeah.
And then at the end when there's a lot.
Yeah.
But we very rarely hear the journey in between, which is, do I buy food or do I pay my phone bill so that my clients can get a hold of me?
Right.
Or do, I get hamburger or do I get oodles and noodles? You know what I mean? Those sacrifices. That's because although you're your own boss and there's certain things outside that mirror needs to look like for you, you have to look successful. I always say that people, for the most part in thinking, help people who look like they don't need help, as opposed to people who need help.
Perception is reality.
All day, every day. Yep. You know what I mean? So how you pull up, what you pull up in, how you're dressed, that's part of what we both do. How does that fashion piece fit into what you're doing?
It really depends on the client. So if I'm showing office property, I absolutely have to have a suit on. If I'm showing retail property, business casual is enough. And the occasional residential property that it depends on the price point, actually. The upper bracket, like for instance, I just sold a house to the ambassador of the Bahamas.
Okay.
So that was $3.6 million. So his expectation was that you wore a suit and tie every day. He didn't have to tell me that. I already knew that. So it just depends. But for the most part, I try and whatever I'm wearing, it always has to match and always has to be clean. Perfect. Like my tennis shoes are always perfectly white. There's no dingy,
right?
None of that.
But that's probably something inner as well.
That's true.
Yeah. So, but
remember I told you I love Michael Jackson. That's how I was raised.
Right. But it's a journey, and it's rewarding, but also too, many times it's the committee. And when I talk about the committee, it's in my head that are things that are telling me, for the most part, positive now, but there are days that it's not.
That's right.
And knowing when to turn it off and when to, if I've submitted something and I haven't heard, oh, they're not going to call me. Why would they? And then maybe 3 days later, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, we were away. We meant to get to you, they meant to send the email. And then that's happened over and over again.
No, I agree.
Yeah. But it's
agree.
life. And I have to remind myself on a daily basis as well. I don't know about you, is gratitude. And that's what my sponsor long ago told me, is like, do you have a gratitude list? When you're feeling down or you're feeling whatever, what are you grateful for? Trust me, it's been worse.
Exactly.
It can get worse. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
How do you feel about that?
I'll tell you what I do on a daily basis. So I get up at 5:30. I do a positive. I post one black fact on Facebook. And then
I saw that. Yeah.
And then a positive affirmation every day. Then I go to the gym. But before that, I always pray a little bit. Thank you, God. Thank you for waking me up. Thank you for my roof. Thank you for my health. Then I go through my routine, go to the gym, dress, to the office, generally in the office by 9:30. So for me, another thing that I do, not all the time, but if I see somebody on the street asking for change, I'll give them some money. And people are, why are you enabling them? No. It's because the little bit of money I give them will help them more than it will hurt me. So that is an expression of gratitude as well, because there were times when I couldn't do that, right? So gratitude is a part of my inner working on a daily basis, but I'm also, grace is probably a lot more important to me, because grace is given to people that don't deserve it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
think everybody can identify with that. I know I can.
I've been blessed with all these things, and so I just have to remember that that grace is the primary driving factor in my life. But I'm also very grateful for everything that I have.
Yeah, but you also have to work to keep it. You have to work to get it.
Well, there's nothing that's free.
And you have to work to keep it.
That's right.
And reinvention, I know for me, for what I do, from event planning to fashion to styling and now teaching it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, I didn't want, like, my parents had this stellar work career, but they did the same thing throughout their career. And
your parents are very sharp, by the way.
Thank you. And I wrote a book, and I thought about it. I wrote a book which is actually being republished called Dyed in Wool. I'll make sure you get a copy.
Okay.
And I was like, where did all of this come from? Because this was not something that I was trained. I'm a history major. And I started looking. My parents had all these old photos, and I got them from relatives and stuff. And I saw, and probably, we grew up in a time when people dressed.
Yes.
Like, there was clothes for church, there was clothes for work, I had play clothes,
Yes.
there were travel clothes, all this kind of stuff. So there was all of these pictures, and these people didn't have a whole lot of money.
Right.
But they were very well groomed, they were very well mannered, and they had a drive that surpassed racism, surpassed sexism, and then I came from that stock. So it was inevitable for me, and from what you're saying, that success was coming.
Yes.
Now, there were things that I'm still learning, but that drive and that sense of who I am and where I came from is most important. And giving it, like we were talking earlier, we do the Marion Barry Summer Youth Program. This was our 7th year. And the thing that I want to give the kids is that, one, you need to know who Marion Barry is. Second, you need to know who you are.
Yes.
Because racism is not going to change. It's not going to go anywhere. Sex, all of these things, it goes in a cycle. So you're going to have something within yourself that you can stand flat-footed and know who you are and know what it is that you do that everybody else is doing that's different. Do you know that about what you're selling?
Yes.
You know what it is.
I know exactly what it is. The thing about me is that, and I'm going to use a trite phrase, I am very diverse. And the reason I say that is because you might see me at a punk rock club. You might see me at a cabaret. You might see me at Popeyes. You might see me at a 4-star restaurant. You just never know where I might show up. And I can identify with all of that at any given time. So because of that, I can identify with a bunch of different kinds of people. Mm-hmm. So diversity, true diversity, is one of my strengths. That's who I am.
And meeting people.
Yes.
Meeting, because I don't advertise, but it's word of mouth. And just meeting. I love meeting people.
Yes.
That's one of the reasons why we have this podcast, because although I have a fashion background, I'm more interested in style. So style encompasses everything. It's where you work, what you wear, your friends, how you grew up, all of those kinds of things, because I'm interested in how you are and why you are the way that you are. Because I learned, we have similarities, we may not. There's always something in common. And so this is a blessing to be able to come here and to do this. So where's the latest place that you've traveled that you've enjoyed?
St. John of the Caribbean. I go every year for 2 weeks. And the reason I like to go there is there are places on that island where your cell phone does not work. and there's nobody else around. You can literally go to a beach and be with 1 or 2 other people. So during the morning, of course, I answer my emails, and then I go out to the beach. So yes, St. John is my latest refuge.
Are you an avid reader?
I'm not.
Okay.
Well, I read sales books.
You just
Yes, I do read sales.
Is there anything new in your game?
No.
It's just redoing and
yeah, it's you know what's new? AI.
What's AI?
The AI chat bots.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It's wonderful.
Okay.
It really is. I mean, I hate to say this, but you can give a chat bot 3 or 4 sentences, and they can come up with a whole biograph of you. It's really amazing.
Oh.
It's really amazing.
I may need to do that.
So I have done that with property listing descriptions and things like that. It saves time also.
So do you do different price ranges? So if somebody, like, say from HPAP says, hey, this is my first home, and I would love for you to represent me.
Yes, I could do that. And because what I try and do is change lives. That's what I do, because my life was changed. I'll give you an example. Earlier this year, I met somebody who was in the hospital. Mm-hmm. He woke up and both of his legs had been taken, severed.
Okay.
So he was living in an apartment that was left in a trust by his boyfriend for his benefit. The trust ran out of money. They sold it. So he had to leave. So he went to an assisted living facility in Tenleytown. So I was like, so what happened to this money that was for your benefit? Oh, they said they'll give me $1,000. I'm like, no. So I called the trustee and I said, well, you guys, I know how much, because I tracked the sale. I said, I know that you guys have $519,000. I said, I know that. I said, so why can't you purchase? We can't afford. No, I'll find him something. So right around the corner, 17th and Church in DuPont Circle, I found him an efficiency apartment for $210,000 with a fee of $365 that included everything, including cable. I said, so why can't you buy this? Oh, where'd you find this? I said, don't worry about where I found it. I said I would find it.
Just pay for it.
I said I would find it, and I did. So that was probably that was the most important transaction of my career thus far. It was only $210,000, but it wasn't about the money.
It was about.
It's not always about the. When people have dollar signs in their eyes, that's when you lose.
It's sad. I think, being an advocate.
Yeah.
Because there are always people out there that really either they don't know or they don't have the drive, and they are accepting to what somebody tells them.
Right.
I'm not one of those people, and you're not as well. But I think that's one of the reasons why we're here too, is that we can give the information, because the more information you have, the more armored you are to make better decisions.
Right.
And know what you have access to.
Another phrase that I use frequently is better off, but not better than.
Yeah. And I like being the lender and not the borrower.
Yeah, right. I like that.
Yeah.
I'll stick you.
That was from my grandmother. We come from an apostolic background. I was raised Baptist, but it was always, the ministers would always say that when things are good, you become the lender and not the borrower. And that was something that stuck with me. So something that you would like to leave with our listeners that has been that mantra, that something special, that someone that may be going into your career path that you would advise them to do?
The most important thing for me is to get up every day with a purpose, knowing I plan what I'm going to do the day before. So when I get up, I'm not wandering around the wilderness. I already know what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So in my business, you have to understand how to market yourself on a daily basis and who your target audience is. Mm-hmm. And your target audience will change, but you have to develop that core target audience at first.
Yeah.
So,
and who you have around you.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So important.
It's very important.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
You need to know why they're there, how long, and for what.
Like you, George.
Yeah.
You're in my sphere now. So.
Yeah. Serendipitous. But thank you so much for coming on. You got to come back, and we're going to talk about real estate more.
Okay.
Congratulations on 26 years.
Thank you.
One day at a time. And how can our listeners reach you on social media?
You can reach me at Scott at scottpurcell.com.
Okay.
Is my website.
Okay.
Or Scott.Purcell at LNF.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you for coming on. Thank you for tuning in to Inside Style, GC Radio 96.3 HD4. I am George Worrell, and remember, real style starts with being comfortable in your own skin. We will see you next time.
In DC, for DC, DC Radio, 96.3 HD4, and DCRadio.gov.